You think the worst part of corporate life is the soul-crushing hours or the stale coffee. It's not. It's the sheer unpredictability of humiliation. I survived 3 years at a cutthroat financial firm by blending into the beige walls, hiding my scent blockers behind a facade of relentless competence. Then, on a random Tuesday, two sticky-handed 5-year-olds barreled through the glass doors of the bullpen, latched onto my knees, and yelled, "Papa's wife." My life ended. And then it started. Fluorescent lights have a sound. A low, persistent buzz that slowly drills into the base of your skull. I was actively ignoring it, staring at a spreadsheet that blurred at the edges. My neck itched fiercely. The medical-grade scent blocker plastered just below my collarbone was starting to peel, its adhesive pulling at my skin. It was hour 10 of my shift. Standard operating procedure for a Tuesday at Hayes and Butler Capital. I hit save, rubbed my eyes, and took a sip of cold, bitter espresso. Corporate environments are hostile to omegas. It's an unwritten rule, rarely spoken aloud but universally understood. If you present as anything other than a beta or a dominating alpha, you are a liability. You are ruled by biology, they say, prone to distraction. So I didn't present. I smothered my natural scent, a soft, unremarkable blend of chamomile and warm paper, under layers of clinical chemicals and unscented antiperspirant. I wore sharply tailored drab suits. I spoke in flat, measured tones. I became part of the furniture. It worked. I was the senior administrative executive for Arian Butler. Arian was the firm's co-founder, an alpha who walked into a room and sucked all the oxygen out of it without saying a word. He didn't rely on aggressive pheromones. He didn't need to. He was simply an immovable object built of broad shoulders, tailored charcoal wool, and a perpetually exhausted jawline. We communicated entirely in nods, succinct emails, and the silent sliding of manila folders across his polished mahogany desk. It was 3:15 p.m. The bullpen was a hive of quiet, frantic energy. Analysts furiously typed away, phones rang with muted urgency, and the air was thick with the sharp, acidic tang of stressed betas and the overbearing musk of junior alphas trying to establish dominance over the copier. The elevator chimed, a soft, pleasant ping that normally heralded the arrival of a courier. Instead, the heavy glass doors burst open. "Toby! Chloe! Stop right there!" The voice belonged to a frantic, flushed teenager, the new nanny. I recognized her from a brief video call a week ago, but before anyone could process her arrival, the two small projectiles had already bypassed the reception desk. Arian's twins. They were 5 years old, a chaotic tangle of dark curls and sticky fingers, wearing matching yellow rain boots despite the dry July weather outside. They hit the carpet of the bullpen and skidded, their wide eyes scanning the sea of gray cubicles. I stood up from my desk, instinct kicking in. Protocol dictated I intercept them, usher them into a quiet conference room, and fetch Arian. I stepped out from behind my monitor, smoothing the front of my slacks. Toby spotted me first. His eyes lit up. He pointed a small, pudgy finger. There! They moved with terrifying speed. Before I could brace myself, two small bodies collided with my shins. Tiny arms wrapped around my knees in a vice grip. Chloe buried her face into my thigh, her curls tickling my wrist. And then, at the exact moment the bullpen fell into a sudden, curious lull, Toby tipped his head back, looked up at me, and shouted at the top of his lungs, "Papa's wife!" The silence that followed was absolute. It was a heavy, suffocating vacuum. The clicking of keyboards stopped. The ringing phones seemed to die in their cradles. 40 pairs of eyes snapped toward my desk. I froze. A cold sweat broke out across my shoulder blades. My heart slammed against my ribs so hard I thought it might crack them. "Papa's wife," Chloe echoed, her voice softer but carrying perfectly in the dead air. "We finded you." I looked down at them. They smelled of apple juice, crayons, and the faint, unmistakable underlying scent of their father, cedarwood and rain. It was a protective, encompassing scent that clung to their clothes. My voice failed me. I swallowed hard, my throat dry as ash. I think you have the wrong person, guys. No, Toby insisted, tightening his grip. Papa says Liam. You're Liam. A choked sound came from the cubicle next to me. Richard, a junior alpha who made it his life's mission to undercut me, had his hand over his mouth, his eyes dancing with malicious glee. The whispers started, a low hiss of gossip catching fire. The door to the corner office opened. Arian Butler stepped out. He held a tablet in one hand, his brow furrowed in concentration. He didn't look up immediately. Liam, I need the Q3 projections for... He stopped. He looked at the bullpen. He saw every analyst staring at me. He saw the nanny hyperventilating by the water cooler, and he saw his children firmly anchored to my legs. For the first time in 3 years, I saw Arian Butler lose his composure. The tablet slipped from his fingers. It hit the carpet with a dull thud. His jaw tightened, and a wave of pure, distressed alpha scent washed over the room. It was thick, sharp, and panicked. He closed the distance between us in 3 long strides. He didn't look at the crowd. He knelt, gently but firmly detaching the twins from my pants. Toby, Chloe, what are you doing here? His voice was remarkably steady, but the muscles in his neck were strained. We wanted to see your wife, Chloe said simply, pouting as her father picked her up. Arian closed his eyes. A muscle twitched in his cheek. He stood, holding a twin in each arm. He finally looked at me. His eyes, usually a flat, unreadable slate gray, were wide and apologetic. My office, he said. It wasn't a request. He turned on his heel. The crowd parted for him instantly. I stood there for a fraction of a second, feeling the burning gaze of every person in that room. My secret, carefully constructed life was unraveling thread by thread. I adjusted my cuffs, lifted my chin, and followed him into the glass box. The heavy oak door clicked shut behind me, sealing us in. The soundproofing was immediate. The buzzing of the fluorescent lights vanished, replaced by the hushed hum of the central air conditioning. The transition from the public stage to this private sanctuary was jarring. Arian set the twins down on the leather sofa in the corner. He pointed a stern finger at them. Sit! Do not move. Do not touch anything. They complied, suddenly subdued by the gravity in his voice. Toby kicked his yellow boots against the sofa base, looking mildly guilty. Arian turned his back to me, bracing both hands on his massive mahogany desk. He let out a long, ragged exhale. His shoulders slumped. The imposing alpha executive melted away, leaving behind a desperately tired man in a very expensive suit. I stood near the door, keeping my distance. My hands were clasped tight behind my back to stop them from shaking. I was running calculations in my head. Severance pay, the job market, whether I could afford to break my lease. I'll start packing my desk, I said quietly. Arian's head snapped up. He turned around, frowning in genuine confusion. What? Why? Because your children just announced to the entire firm that I am your partner. I forced the word out. I refused to say wife. The rumor mill is already spinning. By 5 o'clock, everyone from HR to the janitorial staff will believe we're having an illicit affair. I'm an Omega in a high-powered administrative role. My credibility is gone. Your credibility is compromised. The cleanest solution is my resignation. Arian stared at me. He reached up and pinched the bridge of his nose. Liam, stop. Stop talking like a lawyer for 5 seconds. He walked over to the small wet bar in the corner of his office. He poured a glass of water and drank it in one go. Then he poured another and handed it to me. I took it hesitantly. Our fingers brushed. His skin was warm. Sit down, he said softly. I didn't sit. I leaned against the back of one of the client chairs. How did they even get my name? Arian sighed. He ran a hand through his hair, messing up the perfect professional sweep of it. He looked toward the ceiling, as if asking for patience. Because I talk about you, he admitted, his voice dropping an octave. I blinked. Excuse me? At home, at the dinner table. He gestured vaguely toward the twins. I'm a single father running a multi-million-dollar firm. My life is a series of rolling disasters. When things go wrong, I say, Liam handled it. When I miss a dinner because of a late meeting, I tell them, Liam rescheduled my calendar so I can be home tomorrow. You are. You are the person who keeps my life from falling apart, Liam. They know your name because you are the only constant, reliable force in my adult life right now. I stared at him. I couldn't process it. My cynical brain rejected the sentiment instantly. He was a boss. I was an employee. We exchanged labor for capital. That was it. But looking at him now, really looking at him, I saw the dark circles under his eyes. I saw the slight tremor in his hand as he held the water pitcher. That doesn't explain the title, I said, my voice barely a whisper. Arian flushed. A faint, dusky red crept up his neck. It was the most human thing I had ever seen him do. Last week, he started, clearing his throat. My mother called. She was pressing me about dating, about finding an Omega, finding a mother for the twins. I was exhausted. I told her I already had someone who organizes my life, knows my dietary habits, remembers my mother's birthday, and yells at me when I don't sleep. He paused, looking down at his shoes. I said I was basically married to my assistant. I closed my eyes. A dull ache began to throb in my temples. They overheard. Arian finished miserably. They're 5. They take things literally. To them, the person who takes care of Papa is Papa's wife. I had no idea they had internalized it, or that they would launch a tactical strike on the bullpen to find you. From the sofa, Chloe piped up. You brought Papa his favorite coffee today. We saw. I opened my eyes. The absurdity of it all hit me. I let out a short, breathy laugh. It was entirely involuntary. Arian looked at me, tension radiating from his frame. I'm so sorry, Liam. I'll issue a statement. I'll threaten Richard with termination if he gossips. I will handle HR. You're not losing your job over my children's misunderstanding. I looked at the twins. They were swinging their legs in unison, watching us with wide, innocent eyes. The scent in the room had shifted. Arian's panic had receded, replaced by a deep, hollow scent of guilt and raw fatigue. It pulled at my basest instincts. The buried Omega in me, the one I drowned in suppressants, wanted to step forward, smooth the lines from his forehead, and tell him it was okay. I locked that instinct in a dark box and threw away the key. A statement will just make it worse, I said practically, switching back into my professional mode. It was safer there. We ignore it. We let the news cycle move on. Give it a week, and Richard will do something stupid enough to draw their attention away from me. Orion watched me carefully. You're not angry? I'm terrified, I corrected him flatly. But anger isn't productive. Let's just get through the day. Call the nanny back in, send them home, and we'll pretend this never happened. I set the water glass on the desk and turned toward the door. I thought we were done. I thought I had survived the worst of it. Liam, wait. His voice was different. It wasn't the apologetic tone from a moment ago. It was heavier, deliberate. I stopped, my hand hovering over the cold metal of the doorknob. I looked back over my shoulder. Arian had stepped around the desk. He was standing in the center of the room, looking at me with a terrifying intensity. The guilt in his scent was entirely gone. In its place was something sharp, desperate, and singularly focused. I can't pretend this never happened, Arian said quietly. In fact, I need it to be true. The air in the office went completely still. Even the twins seemed to sense the shift in the atmosphere, their restless kicking coming to a halt. I turned fully to face him. What are you talking about? Arian paced toward the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the gray, smoggy skyline of the city. He stared out at the jagged towers of steel and glass. He shoved his hands deep into his pockets, his broad back tense. Close the blinds, he ordered softly. I didn't move. Arian, please, Liam, just close them. I hesitated, then walked over to the control panel on the wall. I pressed the button. The mechanical hum of the motors engaged, and the heavy opaque shades slowly descended, plunging the room into artificial twilight. I switched on the dim corner lamps. The office suddenly felt entirely too small. Arian turned around. His eyes were shadowed. "My ex-wife Sarah didn't just leave," he began, his voice brittle. "She walked away from the twins when they were 2. She couldn't handle motherhood. She couldn't handle me. I don't blame her for that. But her parents, the Vanderbilts." I knew the name. Everyone in the city knew the name. Old money. Vicious alphas who treated corporate acquisitions like blood sport. "They never liked me," Arian continued. "They thought I was new money. Uncouth. When Sarah left, they laid low, but she relapsed last month. She's in a facility in Switzerland. The Vanderbilts are making a move. They filed an emergency petition for full custody of Toby and Chloe yesterday." A cold spike of dread hit my stomach. Custody battles in the elite circles were brutal. They destroyed lives. "On what grounds?" I asked. "On the grounds that I am an unfit parent," Arian said bitterly. He barked a hollow laugh. "They claim I'm a workaholic alpha with no pack, no bonded omega, and no stable home environment. They argue that raising the twins in a household run by a rotating door of teenage nannies is detrimental to their development. They hired the best family lawyers on the Eastern Seaboard. And they have a point. The judge in family court favors traditional pack structures. A single alpha working 80 hours a week doesn't stand a chance against a sprawling, wealthy family estate." I looked at the twins on the couch. Toby had fallen asleep, his head resting on Chloe's shoulder. Chloe was carefully stroking his hair. They were deeply, profoundly loved. Anyone could see that. "They can't just take your children because you work," I argued, my voice hardening. "They can, and they will," Arian countered, taking a step toward me. "Unless I prove them wrong. The preliminary hearing is in 2 weeks. Coincidentally, it aligns perfectly with the firm's annual partners retreat in Aspen, a retreat that Sarah's father, as a major shareholder, will be attending. He's going to use it to spy on me, to document my lifestyle, to prove to the judge that I have no work-life balance and no stable partner." He stopped 3 feet away from me. He was close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from him. I could smell the sharp, desperate edge of his cedarwood scent trying to punch through my blockers. "I need an Omega, Liam," Arian said, his voice dropping to a gravelly whisper. "I need a stable, capable, intelligent Omega to stand by my side. I need someone the twins already trust. I need to present a united, bulletproof front to the Vanderbilts and the court." The words hit me like physical blows. The pieces clicked into place with terrifying speed. "No," I said, backing up a step. "Absolutely not." "Liam, listen to me." "No, Arian, you listen." My heart was hammering, a frantic bird in my chest. "You're asking me to commit fraud. You're asking me to fake a bond. Do you know what happens to an Omega who gets caught faking a bond in high society? I'd be blacklisted. I'd never work again. And I am not a toy you can just slot into a family portrait to appease a judge." "I am not asking you to be a toy." Arian's voice boomed, bouncing off the soundproof walls. He caught himself, glancing at the twins, and forced his volume down. "I am asking you to be a partner, a business arrangement, an extension of your current contract." "Marriage is not a business arrangement," I hissed. "It is for me," he said, his eyes locking onto mine, blazing with a frightening sincerity. "I don't have time for romance, Liam. I don't believe in it anymore. I believe in loyalty. I believe in competence. I believe in you. You already manage my life. You know my children. You just heard them. They already think you're part of this family. They're children. They're confused." "Then let them be right," Arian pleaded. He ran a hand over his face, looking older than his 35 years. "I am out of options. If I lose them, Liam, if I lose the twins to those vultures—" He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. The pure, unadulterated terror in his scent was suffocating. I crossed my arms tight over my chest, acting as a physical shield against him. Why me? You have money. You can hire an actor, an escort, someone who does this for a living. Because the Vanderbilts will dig, Arian said flatly. They will run background checks that go back to preschool. A hired actor will crack under their interrogation. But you? You're Liam Gallagher. You're made of titanium. You've stonewalled the most aggressive board members in this company without breaking a sweat. You know my schedule, my habits, my financials. If we tell them we've been keeping our relationship quiet to maintain professional boundaries, it makes perfect logical sense. It explains why we spend so much time together. It explains the kids today. It's the perfect cover. He took one final step forward. He reached out and very gently placed his large, warm hands on my shoulders. I should have flinched. I should have shoved him away. HR protocols screamed in my head, but the weight of his hands was grounding. 6 months, Arian said softly, his thumbs brushing against the stiff fabric of my suit jacket. 6 months of wearing a ring, attending the Aspen retreat, and doing a few home visits with the social worker. Once the custody is finalized and the Vanderbilts back off, we file for an amicable divorce. Quietly. I will double your salary. I will vest your stock options immediately, and when it's over, I'll give you a severance package large enough that you'll never have to work for another arrogant alpha again. I stared into his eyes. I searched for manipulation. I searched for the ruthless corporate shark that had built this firm. But all I found was a father standing on the edge of a cliff, asking me to catch him. My logical mind screamed. It told me this was a trap. It told me that getting entangled with an alpha's pack dynamics was a death sentence for my independence. I had spent my entire adult life building walls, plastering on scent blockers, surviving by being untouchable. I looked past his shoulder. Toby shifted in his sleep, mumbling softly. Chloe adjusted her grip on her brother, her small face peaceful in the dim light of the office. Damn it. I hated my own empathy. I hated how deeply it ran, buried beneath the cynicism and the espresso and the corporate armor. I looked back at Arian. I felt the adhesive of my scent patch pulling at my skin. It was suffocating me. 6 months, I repeated, my voice hollow. Arian's grip on my shoulders tightened. 6 months, I swear it. I took a slow, deep breath, inhaling the sharp cedar and rain. Fine, I whispered. But you're buying the ring, and I want it in writing. The look of sheer, overwhelming relief that washed over Arian's face was blinding. But as he pulled me into a sudden, crushing embrace, I stared blankly at the wall over his shoulder, wondering how long it would take for this lie to destroy us both. I signed my life away in blue ink on a Thursday morning. The contract was a masterpiece of legal paranoia. 40 pages of stipulations, non-disclosure clauses, and heavily outlined financial compensations. It was drafted by Arian's private attorney, a terrifying beta woman named Helen, who looked at me like I was a particularly complex tax loophole. I initialed the bottom of page 39. I didn't read it. I had negotiated the broad strokes. The minutiae didn't matter. I was selling 6 months of my life. The price was security. Done, I said, pushing the thick stack of paper across the polished glass table. Helen gathered the documents, her face impassive. Congratulations, Mr. Gallagher. You are now officially engaged to be bonded. The court petition has been updated. The social worker is scheduled for a home visit next Tuesday. She stood up, snapping her briefcase shut. I suggest you start moving your things into the penthouse immediately. The Vanderbilts have private investigators. If they check the lobby logs and see you still commuting from a studio in Queens, this entire strategy implodes. Arian sat beside me. He hadn't spoken since we walked into the room. He was staring at the blank space on the table where the contract had been. He looked up, his jaw tight. I'll have movers at your place by noon. I don't need movers, I replied, standing up and buttoning my suit jacket. I have 2 suitcases. I can take a cab. Arian frowned, a flicker of genuine annoyance crossing his face. You're not taking a cab. My driver will pick you up. We have a narrative to maintain, Liam. Act the part. He was right. I hated that he was right. I swallowed my pride and nodded. By 6 o'clock that evening, I was standing in the foyer of a sprawling, sterile penthouse overlooking Central Park. It looked exactly like Arian's office, expensive, devoid of personality, and impeccably clean. The only signs of life were the brightly colored plastic toys aggressively invading the edges of the Persian rugs. Toby and Chloe were thrilled. They didn't understand the mechanics of a fake engagement. They just knew the person who usually brought their dad coffee and slipped them extra packets of fruit snacks was now sleeping down the hall. The real problem began after the kids went to bed. Arian and I were standing in the massive stainless steel kitchen. The silence between us was heavy, suffocating. The boss-employee dynamic had been shattered, and we had absolutely nothing to replace it with. He slid a small black velvet box across the marble island. "For the narrative," he said quietly. I opened it. It wasn't a gaudy, ostentatious diamond designed to show off wealth. It was a thick, brushed platinum band inlaid with a subtle ring of dark sapphire. It was practical. It was heavy. It was exactly what I would have picked for myself. I slipped it onto my left hand. It fit perfectly. A cold shiver ran down my spine. "There's one more thing," Arian said. He wasn't looking at the ring. He was staring at my collarbone, right where my shirt parted. "The blockers, Liam. They have to go." My hand instinctively flew to my neck, covering the patch hidden beneath my collar. Panic, sharp and irrational, spiked in my chest. "No, absolutely not," I said, my voice thin. "I need them for work. If I go into the bullpen smelling like an Omega, I lose all authority. Richard is already looking for a reason to undermine me." "You won't be in the bullpen," Arian countered softly. "You're attending the Aspen retreat as my partner, not my assistant. The Vanderbilts will be there. Their lawyers will be there. William Vanderbilt is an old-school alpha. He doesn't look for rings, he looks for scent. If you smell like clinical bleach and antiperspirant, he will know this is a sham. A bonded couple mixes scents. It's biology. We can't fake that if you're chemically suppressed." He took a step closer. The air between us felt suddenly thin. "I know what I'm asking," Arian murmured. "I know how hard you've worked to hide it. But if we do this, we have to do it all the way." I stared at the marble countertop. My breathing was shallow. Taking off the blockers wasn't just a physical act, it was stripping away my armor. It was standing naked in a room full of predators. But I looked at the heavy platinum ring on my finger. I had made a deal. My fingers trembled slightly as I reached up, undid the top 2 buttons of my shirt, and caught the edge of the medical adhesive. I peeled it back. It stung, tearing at the fine hairs on my chest. I crumpled the patch into a ball and threw it into the trash can. Then, I waited. It takes about 3 minutes for the chemical suppression to lift. When it did, the air in the kitchen shifted. My natural scent, chamomile, old paper, and a faint warm trace of vanilla spilled into the room. It felt loud. It felt embarrassing. I crossed my arms tightly over my chest, looking away, waiting for the inevitable alpha reaction. The condescension, the predatory shift in posture. Arian didn't move. He didn't step into my space or try to dominate the air. Instead, I watched his shoulders drop. The rigid, permanent tension in his jaw slackened. He closed his eyes, taking a slow, deep breath. His own scent, that sharp, stressed cedar, softened instantly, melting into a deep, earthy rain. It wrapped around my chamomile, not suffocating it, but anchoring it. "Chamomile," Arian said softly, opening his eyes. His gaze was entirely unguarded. "It suits you. It's calming." I swallowed hard, my throat tight. "Don't get used to it. The second the custody papers are signed, the patches go back on." Arian looked at me for a long time, the shadow of a sad smile playing on his lips. "Understood. Get some sleep, Liam. Our flight to Aspen leaves at 6 a.m. Aspen in July is a paradise for the obnoxiously wealthy. The snow is gone, replaced by lush green mountains, crisp air, and sprawling luxury lodges built of imported timber and glass. It was meant to be a corporate retreat. It felt like a war zone. We arrived at the Hayes and Butler private estate just past noon. The gravel driveway was already choked with black SUVs. As we stepped out of the car, the sheer volume of alpha pheromones in the air hit me like a physical wall. Wealthy, competitive executives posturing for dominance. Arian's hand immediately found the small of my back. I flinched, my muscles locking up. I wasn't used to being touched. I certainly wasn't used to an alpha broadcasting possession over me in a public space. "Easy," Arian muttered, his voice a low rumble just for my ears. "Deep breaths. Let them smell you. Let them smell me on you." I forced myself to relax, leaning marginally into his heat. As we walked up the sweeping stone stairs to the main lodge, heads turned. The murmurs started instantly. I saw Richard standing by the massive double doors, holding a flute of champagne. His smug, arrogant grin faltered completely as he took in my tailored casual wear, Orion's hand on my waist, and the undeniable, unsuppressed Omega scent I was projecting. We walked right past him without a word. The welcome reception was held on the expansive back deck, overlooking the valley. Waiters wove through the crowd with trays of absurdly expensive hors d'oeuvres. Arian kept me anchored to his side as he navigated the executives, introducing me with a casual, devastatingly confident tone. My partner, Liam. I played the part flawlessly. I used my icy administrative smile. I shook hands. I remembered names, golf handicaps, and quarterly projections. I watched the confusion in their eyes as they tried to reconcile the ruthless gatekeeper of Arian's office with the bonded Omega standing before them. Then the crowd parted. William Vanderbilt was a man who didn't walk. He stalked. He was a massive alpha, pushing 70, with a thick mane of silver hair and eyes like chipped flint. He smelled of bitter tobacco and cold iron. It was a scent designed to make Omegas submit. My spine stiffened. Arian stepped fractionally in front of me, a subtle shield. "Arian!" Vanderbilt barked, stopping 3 feet away. He didn't offer his hand. His gaze slid past Arian, settling heavily on me. "I see you've brought your secretary. I was under the impression this retreat was for partners and family." "Liam is both," Arian said, his voice dropping into a dangerous, gravelly register I had never heard him use in the office. It vibrated in my chest. "He's my fiancé, and the future stepfather to your grandchildren, William." Vanderbilt let out a short, grating laugh. "Is that so? A sudden engagement, conveniently timed just weeks before a custody hearing. You must think I'm a fool, Arian." "I think you're desperate, William," Arian countered smoothly. "You're grasping at straws because you know a judge won't rip Toby and Chloe away from a stable, 2-parent household just because you don't like my bloodline." Vanderbilt took a step closer, testing the boundary. The iron scent spiked, heavy and oppressive. My instincts screamed at me to lower my eyes, to step back, to yield. I dug my fingernails into my palms to anchor myself. I refused to look away from the old man. "Stable?" Vanderbilt sneered, looking me up and down. "You pulled the scent blockers off a corporate drone and slapped a ring on him. You think a judge won't see through this pathetic performance? How much is he paying you, boy?" Before I could construct a clinical, devastating reply, Arian moved. He didn't yell. He didn't posture. He simply reached out, wrapped his arm fully around my waist, and pulled me flush against his chest. He dipped his head, burying his nose in the crook of my neck, right over my scent gland. He inhaled sharply. The reaction was instantaneous. Arian's cedarwood scent flared, thick and territorial, entirely drowning out Vanderbilt's bitter tobacco. It was a protective dome, absolute and uncompromising. The underlying message was clear to every primitive instinct in the room. Mine. Back off. I gasped, my hands flying up to grip Arian's lapels. My own scent flared in response, mixing with his, creating a warm, sweet, impenetrable cloud around us. My heart hammered, but not from fear, from a sudden terrifying sense of total security. Vanderbilt stopped dead. His nostrils flared. He could smell it. You can fake a ring. You can fake a contract. You cannot fake the biological resonance of an alpha fiercely protecting their chosen omega. Vanderbilt's jaw tightened into a rigid line. He looked at Arian, then at me, the arrogance in his eyes fracturing into genuine doubt. "We'll see what the court-appointed psychologist has to say about this next week," Vanderbilt spat. He turned on his heel and stormed back into the lodge. Arian didn't let me go. He kept his face pressed to my neck for a long moment, his chest heaving slightly against mine. "Arian," I whispered, my voice trembling. "He's gone." He slowly lifted his head. His eyes were dark, dilated, and intensely focused on my mouth. The line between the performance and the reality had blurred entirely. "I know," Arian murmured, his thumb brushing a slow circle against my hip. "But they're still watching." I looked over his shoulder. The entire deck was staring at us. Richard Hayes looked like he was going to be sick. I looked back up at Arian, feeling the heat of his skin through his shirt, the heavy weight of his ring on my finger, and the terrifying realization settling in my gut. I was supposed to be a human shield in a legal battle, but standing here, surrounded by wolves, I realized I didn't want to step away. The lie was working, but the truth was suddenly much more dangerous. We survived Aspen. Barely. The rest of the weekend was a blur of calculated public appearances and agonizingly silent private moments. We played our parts. We held hands under the mahogany dining tables. We leaned into each other during the keynote speeches, and we let our scents intermingle until the air around us felt thick and heavy with domesticity. William Vanderbilt watched us from the periphery, his eyes narrowed, searching for a crack in the armor. He didn't find one. But keeping the armor intact nearly killed me. The private jet ride back to New York was an exercise in sheer physical exhaustion. Arian sat across from me in the plush leather seat, a tablet resting on his lap, but he hadn't swiped the screen in an hour. His tie was loose. The rigid territorial alpha that had challenged Vanderbilt on the deck was gone, replaced by a man hollowed out by stress. I looked out the window at the dark, sprawling grid of the city below. My skin felt overly sensitive, buzzing from 3 days without scent blockers. My own chamomile scent felt too loud, too present. I felt exposed. "The social worker comes tomorrow," Arian said, his voice cutting through the hum of the jet engines. I turned my head. He was looking at me, his slate gray eyes heavy. "I have the itinerary," I replied, my tone automatically slipping back into the flat professional cadence I used at work. It was a defense mechanism. "She arrives at 6. The kids will have just finished dinner. I've scheduled a grocery delivery to ensure the fridge looks adequately stocked for a family of 4. The cleaners came yesterday." Arian let out a slow breath. He tossed the tablet onto the empty seat next to him. "Stop." I frowned. "Stop what?" "We need to be prepared. The Vanderbilts will have briefed her to look for anomalies." "Stop being my assistant for 5 minutes, Liam." He rubbed a hand over his face. "I'm not asking about the groceries. I'm asking how you're doing. You haven't slept more than 3 hours a night since we got here. I can smell it on you. Your scent is souring at the edges. It's stress." I stiffened. Mentioning an Omega's scent changes was an intimate, highly taboo boundary to cross in a professional setting. But we weren't in a professional setting anymore. We were hurtling through the sky, wearing matching platinum rings. "I'm fine," I lied smoothly. "It's just biological whiplash. My body isn't used to producing unsuppressed pheromones. It will regulate." Arian leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "Liam, on the deck with Vanderbilt, I crossed a line." "I know I did. I pulled you in without warning. I used my scent to corner you into a biological response. It was manipulative. And I am sorry." I looked down at my hands. The ring caught the dim cabin light. He wasn't wrong. What he did on that deck was a textbook alpha dominance display, using my ingrained physiological responses to force a public bonding display. I should have been furious. I should have drafted a breach of contract notice in my head. But the memory of his chest against my back, the absolute security of his cedarwood scent shielding me from Vanderbilt's toxic iron, didn't make me angry. It made me ache. It made the deeply buried, lonely parts of my brain hum with a pathetic, desperate warmth. "It worked," I said finally, keeping my voice devoid of emotion. "Vanderbilt backed down. It was a tactical maneuver, Arian. We got the desired result. No apology necessary." Arian stared at me, his jaw tightening. He looked like he wanted to argue, to push past my clinical detachment, but the pilot announced our descent, and the moment fractured. The real challenge wasn't Vanderbilt. It was the penthouse. We arrived at the apartment just after midnight. The nanny had already gone to the guest wing. The massive living room was dark, silent, and echoing. We stood in the foyer, our suitcases resting by the door. "I'll take the couch," I said, pointing toward the sprawling sectional. "Don't be ridiculous. The master bed is massive. You can take the left side, I'll take the right. We won't even touch," Arian said, shrugging off his suit jacket. "Arian, no." My voice was sharper than I intended. "I am not sleeping in your bed. It's a boundary." He stopped, holding his jacket in one hand. He looked at me, taking in my rigid posture, my tightly crossed arms. He nodded once, a terse, sharp movement. "Fine, but I take the couch. You take the bed. I'm not having my supposed fiancé wake up with a ruined spine." He walked away before I could argue, pulling a spare blanket from a hall closet. I retreated to the master bedroom. It smelled overwhelmingly of him. I lay on the edge of the California King, staring at the ceiling, wrapped in a suffocating cloud of cedar and rain. I didn't sleep. The next afternoon, the penthouse was a hive of manufactured domesticity. I had changed out of my suit into a soft cream sweater and fitted slacks. It felt like a costume. Toby and Chloe were sitting on the rug in the living room, surrounded by an aggressive amount of Lego bricks. I sat on the floor with them, trying to follow Chloe's dictatorial instructions on how to build a spaceship. "No, Liam," Chloe sighed, taking a red block from my hand with 5-year-old exasperation. "The engines go on the back. Otherwise, the aliens catch you." "Right, my apologies. Basic aerodynamics," I muttered, sorting through a pile of blue pieces. Toby crawled over, abandoning his half-built tower. He squeezed himself into the space between my side and my arm, leaning his head against my ribs. He was warm, solid, and smelled faintly of baby shampoo. My breath hitched. I froze, my hands hovering over the Lego pile. "Liam?" Toby asked, looking up at me with large, dark eyes. "Are you going to stay?" The question felt like a physical blow to the sternum. I looked down at him. He wasn't asking if I was staying for dinner. He was asking if I was staying permanently. He was asking if the revolving door of nannies and empty evenings was finally closing. I swallowed the lump in my throat. I looked up. Arian was standing in the doorway of his home office, watching us. He was wearing a casual button-down, his sleeves rolled up to the elbows. His eyes were dark, unreadable, pinning me to the floor. I looked back down at Toby. I couldn't lie to him, but I couldn't tell him the truth either. I reached out, my hand trembling slightly, and gently ruffled his dark curls. "I'm here right now, Toby. Let's just focus on the spaceship." The doorbell rang. It was a sharp, piercing sound that shattered the quiet intimacy of the room. The social worker had arrived. The real trial was about to begin. Dr. Evelyn Miller was a beta. In family court, this was the worst-case scenario. Alphas could be manipulated by subservience or challenged by dominance. Omegas could be swayed by emotional appeals and maternal instincts. Betas were immune to all of it. They didn't care about pheromones, pack dynamics, or biological posturing. They cared about facts, stability, and tax returns. She walked into the penthouse in a sensible gray pantsuit, carrying a thick leather briefcase. She didn't smile when Arian introduced us. She simply adjusted her glasses, looked at my left hand, and sat down on the armchair across from the sofa. "Let's dispense with the pleasantries," Dr. Miller said, pulling out a legal pad and a silver pen. "Mr. Butler, you have a notoriously aggressive work schedule. You travel 60 days out of the year. Your children have had 4 different nannies in the past 18 months. And now, precisely 14 days before a major custody hearing, you announce your engagement to your executive assistant, a man who, until 2 weeks ago, maintained a separate residence in Queens. She clicked her pen. The sound was deafening in the quiet room. I am here to determine if this is a stable, loving environment for Tobias and Chloe, or if it is a calculated legal fiction designed to defraud the family court system. Convince me. Arian sat rigidly beside me on the sofa. I could feel the heat radiating off him. His jaw was locked. Dr. Miller, my professional life is demanding, but everything I do is for my children. Liam and I have been entirely discreet about our relationship to avoid disrupting the workplace dynamics. When the Vanderbilts threatened my family, we realized keeping our lives separate was a mistake. Dr. Miller didn't look at him. She looked at me. Her gaze was piercing. Mr. Gallagher, you are a career-driven Omega. You have a pristine record at Hayes and Butler. You are known for being ruthlessly efficient and strictly professional. You wear scent blockers to the office. You have explicitly rejected traditional pack structures. She leaned forward. Why the sudden pivot to domesticity? Why give up your autonomy to become a stepfather overnight? My mouth went dry. I had practiced the answers. I had a dozen meticulously crafted responses prepared in my head, focusing on logical progression, shared values, and mutual respect. But staring into her cold, analytical eyes, I knew a corporate answer would sound like a lie. I took a breath. I didn't look at Arian. I looked straight at Dr. Miller. I haven't given up my autonomy, I said softly, my voice remarkably steady. And I haven't suddenly pivoted to domesticity. I have been taking care of Arian Butler for 3 years. Dr. Miller raised an eyebrow. Her pen hovered over the paper. I manage his calendar. I know when he hasn't eaten. I know he paces when he's anxious about quarterly reports, and I know he drinks his coffee black when he's stressed. I know Toby is allergic to strawberries and Chloe needs a nightlight on the left side of the room, not the right, or she gets nightmares. I felt Arian shift beside me. He slowly reached out, his hand sliding across the cushion to cover mine. His fingers laced through mine, his palm hot and grounding against my cold skin. I didn't pull away. I gripped his hand back, hard. I didn't suddenly decide to be part of this family, Dr. Miller, I continued, the truth slipping out of me, raw and unpolished, bypassing the cynical walls I had spent years building. I just realized I was already deeply embedded in it. Arian is a good father. He is trying to hold a dying star together with his bare hands. The only thing that changed 2 weeks ago was that we stopped pretending I was just an employee. The room was dead silent. I could hear the faint ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway. I could hear Arian's breathing, deep and slightly uneven. My own heart was hammering against my ribs. I had just laid myself bare to a stranger and to the man sitting next to me. Dr. Miller stared at me for a long, agonizing moment. She looked down at our joined hands. She looked at the faint tension in my shoulders and the protective, almost imperceptible way Arian had angled his body toward mine on the sofa. She finally wrote something down on her pad. "The children," she said, her tone marginally softer. "Where are they?" "They're in the playroom," Arian said, his voice thick. He cleared his throat. "I'll go get them." He squeezed my hand once, a desperate, silent thank you, before standing up and walking down the hall. Dr. Miller watched him go. Then she looked back at me. "You're a very good liar, Mr. Gallagher," she said quietly. A spike of ice shot through my veins. "I don't know what you mean. Your words were beautiful, perfectly calibrated." She capped her pen. "But I've interviewed hundreds of bonded couples. When an alpha and an omega are truly bonded, their scents fuse in a specific, irreversible way. You smell like chamomile. He smells like cedar. They are complementing each other nicely in this room, yes, but they are distinct, separate. There is no biological bond between you two. Panic, pure and blinding, clawed at my throat. I opened my mouth to speak, to backtrack, to invent a medical excuse. She held up a hand, stopping me. "However, Dr. Miller said, her eyes narrowing thoughtfully. I also know that biological bonds aren't everything. I watched his eyes when you spoke about him. I watched your pulse jump when he touched you. You may not be biologically bonded, Mr. Gallagher, but you are terrified of losing him, and he is terrified of losing you. She stood up, smoothing her slacks. The family court requires stability, she stated flatly. I don't care if you started dating 3 years ago or 3 weeks ago. I care if these children will be safe. I will be recommending that the Vanderbilt's petition be denied, pending a follow-up interview in 3 months. Keep the rings on. Keep your stories straight. I sat frozen on the sofa as she walked toward the foyer. The relief was so intense it made my vision blur. We had won the battle. But as Arian walked back into the living room carrying Chloe in one arm and holding Toby's hand with the other, his eyes finding mine instantly across the room, I realized with terrifying clarity that I was utterly, entirely doomed. Because Dr. Miller was right. I wasn't just doing this for the severance package anymore. And when the 6 months were over, walking away was going to tear me apart. Autumn bled into winter, and the lie became a living, breathing thing. The hardest part of a fake relationship isn't the public performances. It isn't remembering to hold hands at corporate dinners or manufacturing a believable origin story for inquisitive board members. The hardest part is the quiet moments, the domestic gravity that slowly pulls you out of your orbit until you don't realize you're circling a completely different sun. We stopped keeping score by November. Arian's back had given out after a month on the sectional. It was a Tuesday. He had crawled up from the cushions, his face gray with pain, and I had simply pointed to the right side of the massive California king. He lay down. I stayed on the left. A rigid, invisible wall of cold sheets separated us. For the first 3 nights, neither of us slept. By the 4th, exhaustion won. By the 6th, I woke up with my face buried in the space between his shoulder blades, breathing in the deep, grounded scent of cedar. I panicked, scrambled back to my edge, and lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Arian never mentioned it. The penthouse stopped feeling like a glass box. It became a home. It happened in increments so small I couldn't defend against them. It was Toby insisting I read him The Hobbit because I did the goblin voices better than his father. It was Chloe refusing to eat her oatmeal unless I cut the strawberries into exact, geometrically perfect triangles. It was the way Arian stopped retreating to his study after dinner. Instead, he brought his laptop to the kitchen island, typing quietly while I prepped lunches for the next day, the soft click of his keyboard providing a rhythm to the evening. We were a highly functional machine, but beneath the gears, something dangerous was brewing. It came to a head on a freezing Thursday in mid-December. The snow was falling in thick, heavy sheets against the floor-to-ceiling windows. The twins were asleep. The apartment was completely silent, save for the hum of the HVAC unit. I was sitting on the rug in the living room, surrounded by a sea of wrapping paper, meticulously folding the corners on a box containing a plastic dinosaur. Arian walked in from the hallway. He had just finished a brutal 3-hour conference call with the Tokyo office. He looked wrecked. His tie was gone, his collar unbuttoned, and the sharp lines of his face were drawn tight with fatigue. He didn't go to the bar. He didn't go to his laptop. He walked straight over to where I was sitting and dropped onto the rug beside me. He groaned, tilting his head back to rest against the base of the sofa. Tell me the Vanderbilts are backing down. Lie to me if you have to. They're backing down, I said softly, tying a silver ribbon around the dinosaur. Helen forwarded the email an hour ago. William Vanderbilt's legal team formally withdrew the petition for full custody. The follow-up with Dr. Miller yesterday sealed it. She signed off on our domestic stability. It's over, Arian. You won. Arian didn't celebrate. He didn't smile. He just closed his eyes, a long, shuddering breath escaping his lungs. The suffocating anxiety that had tainted his cedar scent for the last 5 months evaporated. In its place was a heavy, profound exhaustion. He turned his head to look at me. His eyes were dark, tracking the movement of my hands as I set the wrapped box aside. I didn't win, Arian said quietly. We won. I couldn't have done this without you, Liam. I know what this cost you. I know how much you hate being exposed. It was a contract, I deflected. reaching for another unshaped box. My hands were suddenly unsteady. We executed the terms. It was mutually beneficial. Orion reached out. He caught my wrist, stopping my nervous movement. His fingers were hot against my skin. "Stop," he murmured. "Stop hiding behind the paperwork." He pulled gently, forcing me to turn and face him fully. We were inches apart. The air between us felt dense, charged with a static electricity that made the fine hairs on my arms stand up. Without the blockers, my body betrayed me instantly. My chamomile scent spiked, sweet and anxious, swirling around us. Arian leaned in. He didn't break eye contact. He brought his free hand up, his thumb brushing a stray piece of tape from my cheek. His touch was incredibly gentle, a stark contrast to the ruthless alpha the world saw. "Dr. Miller said we weren't bonded," Arian whispered, his voice dropping into that low, chest-rumbling register. "She said our scents were separate." "She was right," I breathed, my heart hammering against my ribs. "She was," Arian agreed, his gaze dropping to my mouth for a fraction of a second before meeting my eyes again. "But they aren't separate anymore, Liam. Smell it." I froze. I stopped fighting my instincts and actually focused on the air in the room. He was right. The sharp, distinct boundary between his cedar and my chamomile was gone. They hadn't just mixed, they had fused. It was a completely new scent, a warm, earthy sweetness, like old books in a wooden cabin after a rainstorm. It was the biological hallmark of a true, irreversible alpha-omega bond. It was something that couldn't be faked, couldn't be forced, and couldn't be undone. My breath hitched. Panic and an overwhelming, crushing warmth flooded my chest simultaneously. "Arian," I choked out, pulling my wrist free from his grip. I scrambled backward until my shoulders hit the edge of the coffee table. "No, that's just close proximity. It's a biological echo. It fades when the proximity ends." Arian watched me retreat, his expression breaking. The vulnerability in his eyes was unbearable. "Is that what you want?" he asked, his voice raw. "Do you want it to fade?" I looked away, staring blindly at the snow piling up against the glass. The contract ended in 2 weeks. Helen had already drafted the divorce papers. The severance package was sitting in a folder on my desk. I had my life back. I had my independence back. But looking at the life I had built here, I realized my independence was a barren, empty room. "I want to go to sleep," I lied, my voice shaking. I stood up abruptly, brushing non-existent dust from my jeans. "I'll finish wrapping these tomorrow." I practically fled down the hallway. Arian didn't follow me, but as I lay on my side of the bed that night, the cold sheets offering no comfort, the scent of cedar and rain clung to my skin, a permanent brand I didn't know how to wash away. January 4th, the day the contract officially expired. The penthouse felt like a mausoleum. The Christmas decorations had been boxed away, leaving the living room feeling cavernous and empty. The twins were at school. Arian had left for the office before I woke up. I stood at the kitchen island, staring at the manila folder sitting on the marble countertop. It was delivered by courier an hour ago. Inside was a cashier's check with a number so large it looked fake. Beside it was a stack of legal documents, dissolution of domestic partnership, non-disclosure agreements, a glowing letter of recommendation. I picked up the pen. It felt like it weighed 10 pounds. This was the finish line. I had survived. The Vanderbilts were gone. Arian's children were safe. I could move back to Queens, find a new job at a firm that respected my boundaries, and slap the scent blockers back on. I could disappear. I signed the first page. My signature looked jagged, aggressive. I turned to the second page. The front door clicked open. Heavy footsteps echoed in the foyer. I looked up as Arian walked into the kitchen. He was wearing his winter overcoat, snow dusting the broad shoulders. He looked at me, then down at the manila folder, his jaw locked. "You're signing them," he stated. It wasn't a question. "That was the agreement," I replied, keeping my voice perfectly level. I capped the pen. The 6 months are up. Helen works fast. Arian took off his coat, throwing it carelessly over one of the bar stools. He walked around the island, stopping right in front of me. The physical distance between us vanished. "Don't sign the rest," he said. I looked up at him. "Arian, we have a deal." I upheld my end. "You get your family, I get my severance." "I don't care about the deal." Arian's voice cracked like a whip in the quiet kitchen. He slammed his hand flat against the marble countertop, making me flinch. He instantly recoiled, his eyes wide with regret. He took a breath, forcing his voice down. "I don't care about the deal," he repeated, his tone desperate. "I care about the fact that Toby asked me this morning why you were packing a suitcase. I care about the fact that Chloe cried because she thought you were mad at her. And I care about the fact that I spent the last 3 hours sitting in my office, staring at a wall, realizing that if you walk out that door, my life goes completely dark again." I gripped the edge of the island. "You are just used to me. It's convenience. I'm your assistant, Arian. I manage the chaos. You can hire someone else to manage it." "I don't want someone else to manage it." He stepped closer, crowding me against the counter. His scent flared, not dominant, not territorial, but pleading. It was a raw, open wound of a scent. "I want you, not because you fold the laundry or handle my calendar. I want you because you challenge me, because you look at William Vanderbilt and don't blink, because you love my children, because my scent fused with yours, Liam. You think that's proximity? That's biology telling us we belong together. That's my soul recognizing yours." My throat tightened. The cynical walls I had maintained for years were crumbling, turning to ash under the weight of his honesty. "I'm terrified," I whispered, the confession tearing out of me. I looked down at the divorce papers. My whole life, I survived by being untouchable. If I stay, if I make this real, I lose my armor. I give you the power to destroy me." Arian reached out. This time, I didn't pull away. He took my face in both his hands. His palms were warm, slightly rough, and incredibly grounding. He forced me to look up into his slate-gray eyes. "I will spend the rest of my life making sure you never need armor again," Arian vowed, his voice thick with emotion. "You are my partner, Liam. In business, in this house, in everything. Break the contract. Stay." A tear slipped free, hot and humiliating, tracking down my cheek. Arian caught it with his thumb, his touch reverent. The fear was still there. It would always be there. But looking at the alpha standing in front of me, stripped of his corporate ruthlessness, offering me everything he had, the fear finally felt smaller than the alternative. I reached up, wrapping my hands around his wrists. I pulled his hands away from my face, holding them tightly. I looked at the manila folder. With my free hand, I picked it up, turned, and dropped it straight into the stainless steel trash can. Arian exhaled a shaky breath, a sound of pure, unadulterated relief. He didn't hesitate. He pulled me flush against his chest, burying his face in the crook of my neck. I wrapped my arms around his shoulders, burying my face in his. As our scents collided, finally dropping the last pretense of resistance, the deep, warm resonance of the bond snapped perfectly into place. It wasn't a corporate merger. It wasn't a legal strategy. It was just two terrified, exhausted people finally realizing they had built a home in the middle of a war zone. And for the first time in my life, I knew I didn't need to run. If Liam's desperate deal kept you on the edge of your seat, you won't believe what happens in Aspen when the scent blockers come off and the Vanderbilts start digging. Can a fake bond survive real instincts? Hit that like button if you want to see Arian's protective alpha side unleashed. Share this with your fellow Omegaverse fans, and make sure to subscribe so you don't miss part 4. The office drama is just heating up, and you definitely want to be here for the fallout.